In today's AI in C# video, we'll be doing an experiment. Can AI just be given an API key and code access and actually do something? This is the Trello experiment where we try to give AI access to a Trello board using the API and just Codex and see if it can figure it out. So I have 3 takes on this. The first one is that we are gonna try and just tell the agent, hey, here are your credentials. In Trello, you need both an API key and a token. And I will show these API keys and tokens doing this, but they will be deleted after this video is done. And I'm just giving it the code interpreter tool up in responses client and seeing if it can figure it out. So let's run this. And I have my Trello board here. And we are just asking, what Trello boards do I have? Right now it's thinking. Meaning it's making the code interpreter container up in the cloud and working on it. And we come back that it can't call the Trello API from its environment because its external network access is disabled. I actually didn't know this prior to making this, but these code interpreter setups, sandboxes, cannot call the internet. So what we're doing here will not work. We will simply not be able to do anything about this, despite us trying. So we can take one out of the window. We need to build something our own. And in order to do that, let's jump to step number 2. I will do something that is dangerous. So you shouldn't do this unless you feel secure and you know the code. Because what I'm telling this agent here is that it again have the API key and token, and it have a tool called compile and execute C# code. Because I've made a small C# code runner here, and I put in safeguards that I actually need to approve every piece of code put in here, because that code could delete my hard drive or format it or do evil stuff. But what I'm essentially just doing is I'm using a NuGet package called Code Analysis C# Scripting. And with that, I can run C# code. So the AI should just give me some code and then return a string. And with that, it should be able to do this. So I'm giving it a few assemblies like object, HTTP, list, and JSON serializer, and giving a few usings here. And then I tell it to evaluate and run this code, and nothing special here in that it just returns a value, and I write that out. It can perhaps not compile, or there will be some runtime errors. Again, this is dangerous. This is not a sandbox like the code interpreter up in the cloud, but it can do anything your user can do with this. We could try to lock it down, but there's unfortunately not a good way to lock down C# in general. We could go up and put it into an Azure function, and then it would be kind of safe up there. But let's see how we use it. So we tell it, you have this tool available, you have the API key and the token, and you should make this as pure code. Don't put any name classes or namespaces or using around it. And you need to return a string. And in order for it to be good, I give it a small example on how that code should look like. It should be some kind of HTTP client, and then it should go with that client and get some string post and so on. So we get that tool, and then we just make a chat loop. So we'll switch to that, and let's see how that goes. Let's bring up this as well. So I could just ask it, just like we did with the first one that didn't work, what Trello board do I have? And it will like to execute this code var client equals new HTTP client with the API key and token, and the URL, which to me looks okay. I'm pretty knowledgeable about the Trello API. So this looks really right. So I want to approve that. It's now executing the code, and it gives back a lot of JSON, which is the correct thing, which it takes and interprets as, yeah, I have this, my Trello board, and it's on this URL, which is correct. So then I could say to it, add a new card meaning a task on this, on the first board, which is the only board we have. We want the new card to be called hello AF. On the first list, meaning the to do, and add a red label, which is a category label. It will think over that. And it wants to run this piece of code. So it uses the keys, it uses the ID of the board like it should. It gets all the lists, which makes sense because it needs to get the ID of this list. It gets that. It gets all the labels of the board, make also sense. Find the one that have the color red and create a new card with some data, name, ID list, and labels, which is perfectly correct. So I will say yes. And this didn't work because it put it in incorrectly, but it's built to try again because it's just a tool. So let's see what it did wrong. It must have given it in a slightly incorrect manner. And now it came back and made the card. Makes sense. And let's end by saying move the card to this to the this week list, which is over here. So I want to move this over here. In order to do that, it needs to do a put. So it's taking the thing, that makes sense. Getting the lists. And it's making an update URL with the put async, and we want to approve that. And it have moved the card. So without the approval part, this would actually be fairly quick. And I am not surprised, but I'm happily surprised actually that this actually works and how fast it can be done. And this is with a ChatGPT 4 Mini, 4.1 Mini. So it's a very small model that can do this stuff. It is a little slow, and it's incredibly unsafe to do it this way right now, at least. So we need to secure my code generation tool if we wanted to do this, but you can actually do it. The Trello API is very, very known to AI, so that helps, of course. So if it had been some AI that you have invented that is not listed anywhere, of course this wouldn't work. But then you could make an MCP tool that told about your API and then work with it. I have made a third option as well. which is the more sensible choice. It takes a little extra work, but it's probably the safest and the best way of doing this, and this is pure function calling. So in this case, I'm just telling it's an Trello expert, and it needs to use the various tools to get info and do actions. And then I have made, as you can see here, 6 different tools, so it can do the work. So add a card, and this is using something called Trello.net that I have made, so it's easy to do work with Trello. So this is just an API, and I'm giving the 6 methods here, well meaning that the other one could do anything I asked it if it's just smart enough to make the code. Here I'm setting the limits, but it might be a good limit that I can't delete the board, or I can't delete the entire account of Trello, because here I'm controlling what can be done and delete is not part of it. So doing it this way works pretty much the same way. Let's get rid of this here and do the same thing. One thing I didn't mention as well, that the second take with this code generation has against it, it takes quite a few tokens because you pay for the entire set of C# code that it writes on the fly. So it's not a cheap way of doing things. I've seen it use up to 10,000 tokens in one go. But if we use tools, it's of course a little faster and a little more controlled. So we call the tool get boards in order to find out what boards we had. We can add the new card. It gets the labels and the lists first before it can create the new card, and it does. And we can of course move the card. So which of these 3 takes would I use today? Definitely number 3. Mostly because it's not a lot of code that needs to be written in order to use this API. But it's kind of interesting that this works with just making C# code. Had C# had a way to sandbox C#, I would probably actually begin to use something like this, telling a little more about APIs and stuff. But today it's probably too dangerous in real life, but it is quite incredible that it actually works, and for such a cheap model. When I started this experiment, I thought I would need it to go to ChatGPT 5 or even the ChatGPT 5 Codex that can write code better in order to make this work. But it nails it with just a small mini model that are dirt cheap. And that is kind of incredible, but use it at your own risk. The experiment is done, and see you in the next video.